Hello everyone, welcome back to our lecture, still under endocrine system, and now we move to lecture 4, and the title of this lecture is the relationship between the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. Okay, so make sure you have my lecture notes. Okay, so we move to the next slide. At the end of this topic, you'll be able to describe the anatomical and physiological relationship between the hypothalamus and pituitary glands. And the second one, to describe the location, storage, and secretion of hormones by the hypothalamus. And two, pituitaries, okay, under the pituitary glands, which is the first is anterior and the second one is posterior. Okay, so the keyword of this chapter, okay, the first one is hypothalamus. Make sure you have to know where and what is the hypothalamus, and the second one, what is anterior and posterior pituitary gland, especially the hormone released by anterior and posterior. Okay, the third one, the objective here is to introduce the major hormones produced by these organs with significant emphasis on how hormone secretion and actions are controlled. Okay, so I think slide number 3, you can refer to the location of the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Okay, make sure you know where is the hypothalamus and the pituitary. And don't worry, I think under anatomy subject, gross anatomy subject, the lecturer will explain later in terms of the location of the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. So now we move to the next slide. Okay, number 4, the pituitary gland is often portrayed as the master gland of the body. Okay, under pituitary gland, as I mentioned before, anterior we have 7 hormones and posterior we have 2 hormones. Secrete the hormones that collectively influence all cells and affect virtually all physiologic processes. The pituitary gland may be a king, but the power behind the throne is clearly the hypothalamus. So this is the connection between the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. In terms of the function, in terms of the hormone release. Okay. Number 7, the hypothalamic hormones are referred to as releasing or inhibiting hormones, which is turn off and turn on, reflecting their influence on anterior pituitary hormones. So we move to the next slide. You can refer slide number 5. Slide number 5 to show you about the releasing and inhibiting the hormones, okay, by the hypothalamus through the anterior pituitary gland. Okay, and then go straight to the systemic target organs or target tissue in terms of the physiological function. Now we move to the next slide. The posterior pituitary is in effect a projection of the hypothalamus. It does not produce its own hormones, but only stores and releases the hormones created by the hypothalamus, whereas the anterior pituitary produces and secretes its own hormones. Okay, so now, as I mentioned before, okay, we have 7 hormones under anterior and we have 2 hormones under posterior. So please remember this one and the function as well. I think the function is on lecture 5. Okay, lecture 5. This is lecture 4, yeah. So lecture 5 in terms of the function. Okay, so we have 7 hormones under anterior and 2 hormones under posterior. Okay, growth hormone, prolactin, thyroid, adrenocorticotropic, follicle stimulating hormone, LH, melanocyte stimulating hormone. Those. So this is one. So this one under under anterior pituitary, and under posterior we have antidiuretic hormone or ADH or vasopressin and oxytocin. Okay, guys. The hypothalamus is the major integrating link between the nervous and endocrine system. It receives input from several areas of the brain, internal organs, and retina. Okay, now we move to the next slide. So, guys, so please, maybe you can read or try to remember which one is the infundibulum, the connecting stalk, where is the posterior lobe, where is the anterior lobe. You can see here the left one is posterior lobe, the right one is anterior lobe. You can see from the venule what is the hormone release under the anterior and what is the hormone release under the posterior. You can see here under the venule. Okay, and then maybe you can see the primary capillary plexus, and then the secondary capillary plexus. Okay, primary, the first one which is near to the hypothalamus, the secondary capillary plexus near to the posterior and the anterior. You can refer the hypophyseal portal system, the primary and the secondary. Okay, so please remember this keyword. Okay, after this we will go one by one in terms of the function when we talk about the blood vein, or the blood through the for example the arteriole and the venule. Okay, so please remember this one first. Okay, where is the primary, where is the secondary, where is the posterior and the anterior. Okay guys, so we move to the next slide. Okay, pain, stress, emotional experiences all cause changes in hypothalamic activity. The hypothalamus controls the autonomic nervous system, regulates body temperature, thirst, hunger, sexual behavior, defensive reactions, and fear. The hypothalamus attached to the pituitary gland by stalk we call the infundibulum. Okay, maybe you can refer to the picture, the infundibulum. Okay, guys, we move to the next slide. Hypothalamic hormones reach the anterior pituitary gland through a portal system, okay, from the hypothalamus portal system, which carries blood between two capillary networks without passing through the heart. Blood flows from the median eminence into the infundibulum and anterior pituitary from the superior hypophyseal arteries, which form the primary plexus of the hypophyseal portal system. Neurosecretory cells near the median eminence secrete the hypothalamic releasing and inhibiting hormones into the primary plexus. Okay, guys, number 6, 7, and 8 is actually referred to the anterior flow, anterior flow from the hypothalamus through the primary plexus, through the hypophyseal arteries. Okay, so number 9, the hormones are synthesized in the neural cells bodies, packaged inside vesicles and transported to the axon terminal. So when we talk about the vesicles, when we talk about the axon terminals, it's actually related with the nerve system. Okay, so this is number 9. Okay, now we move to number 10. When nerve impulses reach the axon terminals, they stimulate the vesicles to undergo exocytosis, okay, especially in the synapse area. The hormones diffuse into the primary plexus. The blood in the primary plexus drains into the hypophyseal portal veins, which pass down the outside of the infundibulum and into the anterior pituitary. Number 12, here the portal veins divide into another capillary network called the secondary plexus of the hypophyseal portal system. Then the last one, under anterior, the anterior pituitary hormone diffuse into the secondary plexus and into the anterior hypophyseal veins for distribution to their target organs or target tissues throughout the body. So this is to show you about the flow from the hypothalamus, okay, through the hypophyseal veins, okay, through the target organs by the anterior pituitary glands. Okay, so this is anterior process first. Okay, guys. Now we move to the posterior pituitary gland. Okay. Before that, anything in terms of the picture, or I think maybe you can refer, or not yet, Okay, now, so this is hypothalamus and posterior pituitary gland. Number 1, the posterior pituitary gland does not synthesize hormones but release or secrete hormones. They release or secrete hormone, especially oxytocin and ADH. They release. They not synthesize but they release. Okay, the axons of the neurosecretory cells in the paraventricular and supraoptic nuclei of the hypothalamus from the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. Please refer this one through the figure. The tract begins in the hypothalamus and ends near blood capillaries in the posterior pituitary gland. The hormones such as vasopressin and oxytocins are synthesized in the neural cells, packed in vesicles, and transported to the axon terminals in the posterior pituitary gland. Okay, guys, we move. Number 5, nerve impulses propagating along the axon will reach the terminal and trigger exocytosis of the vesicles. Blood is supplied to the posterior pituitary through the inferior hypophyseal arteries, which drains the capillary plexus of the infundibular process, the capillary network, which receives the secreted oxytocin and vasopressin. From this plexus, the hormones pass into the posterior hypophyseal veins for distribution to their target cells in the body. Okay, so you can see, please make sure when you read this blood flow in terms of the hormone blood flow, please refer to the figure that I showed you previously in terms of where is the hypophyseal, where is the posterior, where is the anterior in terms of the blood flow. Okay, guys. I think this is the last slide. Okay, function of the hypothalamus. You can see here appetite, thirst, body temperature, vasomotor activity, emotion, use of body nutrient reserves, activity of intestine, sleep, sexual behavior, production and release of releasing hormones. Okay, so this is a function of hypothalamus. I mean the first one. Okay, that we studied. I think slide number 1 and number 2. Sorry, number 2 and number 3, the function of the hypothalamus. And then after that, we move to the posterior and the anterior in terms of the hormone. 7 hormone under anterior, 2 hormone under posterior. And this pituitary gland is connected with the hypothalamus. Okay, guys. So I have to stop here. We move to the next slide. Sorry, the next lecture, which is lecture 5. Okay, so I have to stop here. So stay well, stay safe, and see you after this. Bye.